Hey guys, PlonkerBoy900 here and welcome back to a brand new challenge. A few weeks ago I did a challenge on Emerald Kaizo where I tried to beat the game using the first 6 Pokemon I found. Now, spoiler alert, this didn't go well. We actually managed to make it all the way to Glacia, but no further than that. So this time I decided it was time to get revenge. Today we find out, can I beat Pokemon Emerald Kaizo using the first 6 Pokemon I find? Again. The rules for this are the same as last time. I can only use the first 6 Pokemon I find and that does not include my starter. No items in battle, but this game doesn't let you do that anyway, so that won't be a problem. And just to spice things up a bit, I decided not to use any Pokemon that I used in my last video. I know we didn't do it last time, but I'm feeling confident, so let's just jump straight into it. I start the game and this time pick the male character, calling him Kaneki. As always, comment down below if you get the reference. I choose Torchic as my starter this time and we just about managed to beat May. Now we have our Pokedex and Pokeballs, we can finally get our team of 6. Now last time we got a Wurmple here, so I'm hoping for something slightly better than that. Surely it's gotta be better, right? Maybe it's a Poochyena. It'll do. I catch it and move on to Oldale Town where we can catch our second member. This place is full of fire types, so hopefully we get something decent, and it ends up being a Growlithe, which is actually a really good Pokemon. Arcanine is incredibly powerful, so I'm really stoked to have this on the team. I head further north for our next Pokemon, and it actually ends up being a Poliwag. The Poliwag evolution line is one of my favourites, so I'm really happy to have this on the team as well. I head west and decide to get all 3 of the remaining team members on this route. The first one is a Spinarak. We couldn't go one run without a weak bug type, could we? Our second Pokemon on this route ends up being an Electrike, which I don't really know how to feel about. I've never really liked this Pokemon, but maybe it'll prove me wrong. I decide to stay on this route for our final team member, and it ends up being a Minun. Not my first choice, but beggars can't be choosers, so I add it to the team, and now we have our full team of 6. Well, I gotta say, this team is looking better than the last one. I'm actually feeling quietly confident. It's also worth noting that by the time this team is fully evolved, we'll actually have 3 Pokemon with the ability Intimidate, so that should really come in handy. I really am genuinely happy with this team. The first major fight of this run is Red, but he wasn't actually too much of a problem. His first Pokemon's Eevee, so I start with Minun and just start spamming Thundershock. All he does is spam Curse though, so we take it out without even taking damage. Bulbasaur gets easily dealt with by Growlithe thanks to us getting a burn, and next up is Pikachu. A couple of bites from Electrike are not quite enough to take it out, but we do have Quick Attack, so we can just take it out from there. Poliwag destroys Charmander with a critical hit, so it's just down to his final Pokemon, Squirtle. I send in Minun and do a lot of damage, but we do get put to sleep. It doesn't take us long to wake up though, and one more Thundershock is enough to win us the fight. We arrive in Rustboro City and I decide to do a little bit of training before the first gym. In the process we evolve Poochyena into a Mightyena, and we even evolve Spinarak into an Ariados as well. This should make the gym a little bit easier, but this is Kaizo, so who knows. The first gym leader is Roxanne, who leads off with a Nose Pass. I start with Poliwag and put it to sleep, and then just use 2 Bubble Beams for an easy knockout. Next up is Lileep, so I send out our newly evolved Ariados. I'm able to outspeed though, and 1 super effective Signal Beam is all it takes. I stay in on Lunatone, who comes out next, but he's actually faster. We survive a super effective Rock Slide though, and just retaliate with 1 more Signal Beam for another easy knockout. Next up is Anorith, so I swap into Poliwag and go for another Bubble Beam. It's not enough to KO, but we survive the incoming X-Scissor and just finish it off with 1 more. Relicanth is out next, so I swap into Minun, but we're faster and 1 Wild Charge is enough to take it out thanks to a critical hit. Last up is Shuckle though, and this thing is a real pain, so I just swap into Ariados and go for Toxic. It's basically an easy win, all I have to do is stay alive, which we do. And we win the first badge. That actually wasn't too bad. We sail to Dewford Town, and as always I make the trendy saying something much better, and do some training. In the process, Poliwag actually evolves into Poliwhirl, a definite upgrade for sure. With that we take on the second gym leader, Brawly. Hitmontop almost takes us out with a couple of Rock Slides, but we just hang on and hit a Psychic for good damage. We do go down the next turn though, so I swap into Minun and finish it off with a Thunderbolt. Hitmon leads out next, so I try and paralyze it with Electrike, but I completely forgot about his ability. We take a lot of damage from Rolling Kick as well, so I decide to just go for Shockwave to get a small amount of damage in before we go down to 1 more. I swap in Poliwhirl to finish it off with a Body Slam, and next up is Hitmonchan. I go for Body Slam again, which does about half, and we paralyze it as well. He hits back with a Rock Slide, but it really doesn't do that much damage, so 1 more Body Slam is all it takes to KO. Meditite's out next, so I stay in and we get hit with a Brick Break, but a couple of body slams finish it off no problem. Poliwrath is out next, so I swap back into Minun and go for a Thunderbolt. Much to my surprise, it's actually enough to one-hit KO, so it's just down to his final Pokemon, Hariyama. I stay in and we just survive a hit with 1 HP remaining, and I'm able to hit a couple of Thunderbolts. 2 Thunderbolts aren't quite enough to finish it off, but we do have Quick Attack. We don't get fully paralysed and it's enough to finish it off, winning us the second badge with relative ease. Once again we have to do this absolutely horrible ice puzzle, but it didn't take us as long this time. About 20 minutes is all it took for us to get through it this time. We meet with Steven and now we can make our way to Slateport City. We beat Team Aqua with ease, and in the process we actually evolve Electrike into Manectric. Little did I know that this would actually end up being an amazing team member later down the road. We arrive in Moorville City and face off against the third gym leader, Watson. This guy is always a pain and this run was no different. Jolteon's out first and Growlithe does an okay amount of damage before going down to a couple of Thunderbolts, so I swap into Minun. We're able to take it out with no problems thanks to Seismic Toss, so next up is Lantern. I send in Ariados, who's actually quite bulky at this point, and takes a Surf no problem. I hit back with a Sludge Bomb and it actually does over half. We get the Poison as well, but we're able to finish it off with one more. I swap into Mightyena as Ampharos comes out and we hit a Poison Fang for decent damage, but we get the Poison as well. We do get paralysed, but a couple more Poison Fangs are all we need to get the KO. Raichu does some good damage to Minun, but we're able to take it out in a few hits without any real problems. Electabuzz is out next, so I just go into Manectric and go for a Thunderbolt. It's not very effective, so it doesn't do that much, but a few more are enough to finish it off. Watson's final Pokemon is his own Manectric, but a couple of Thunderbolts and a Quick Attack are all we need to get the win. That gym fight wasn't quite as bad as last time, but trust me, it still took a lot of attempts. Shortly after this gym fight, we actually grow Poliwhirl to level 37, where it evolves into Politoed. I was intending to use a Poliwrath, but I had a change of heart. I've never actually used a Politoed before, believe it or not, so this will be interesting. We face off against Red once again, but he wasn't actually that difficult this time. Trust me though, there is a difficult Red fight coming up. Now we arrive in Falaba Town, we can actually get ourselves a Firestone. With this we can finally evolve Growlithe into Arcanine. Arcanine is definitely going to be an absolute MVP of this team, I can already tell. I am beyond happy that we have this on the team. The next really challenging fight of this run was Maxie. He starts with a Registeel. I go for Arcanine and just hit a Flamethrower, which does under half. We get paralysed by Thunder Wave, but I did equip a Cherry Berry just for this occasion. One more Flamethrower brings it down to red health, but we do get hit with another Thunder Wave. I just know he's going to explode, so I swap into Minun. And I was right, he goes for Explosion, which takes us both out. Claydoll's out next, so I swap into Mightyena. His Earthquake hardly does anything because of our Intimidate, and Crunch does a good amount of damage, thanks to a critical hit. But then... Next up is Alakazam, so I swap back into Arcanine. Psychic hurts, but leaves us on a very nice amount of HP. I hit with a Body Slam, which actually ends up doing over half. Unfortunately though, we're not surviving another Psychic, so I swap into Manectric and just finish it off with the Crunch. Dusclops is a real pain, so I just poison it with Ariados, hoping he won't use Rest. We deal about 50% before we go down, so I swap into Manectric, and thankfully one Crunch is enough to finish it off from there. I stay in against Crobat as we're hit with a Poison Fang, which does over half and poisons us. Thankfully we survive though, and one Thunderbolt is enough to KO. Maxie's final Pokemon is Houndoom, so I swap into Politoed. Hidden Power does under half as we hit back with a Bubble Beam for a really good amount of damage. We're able to survive one more Hidden Power, so one more Bubble Beam is enough to finish it off. I think that fight went pretty well, all things considered. Flannery's up next, and you might expect Politoed to be good here, but it's actually always sunny, so water moves don't do that much. Instead, I just start with Arcanine and 2 Extreme Speeds take out her first Pokemon. Charizard's up next, so I swap into Minun as we have the super effective Thunderbolt, and it does a lot of damage. She survives on a Sliver though and goes for Solar Beam, which doesn't do that much, so one more Thunderbolt finishes it off, and next up is Typhlosion. I decide to stay in and go for another Thunderbolt, which does a decent amount of damage, but she hits back with a Heat Wave, which does a lot. We hang on though and hit one more Thunderbolt, which does a lot before we finally go down to one more. I swap into Manectric and just finish it off with a Thunderbolt, and next up is Blaziken. I stay in and hit another Thunderbolt, which does way over half, as she hits back with a Solar Beam, which doesn't do that much. One more finishes it off, and next up is Arcanine, so I stay in and hit another Thunderbolt, which actually paralyzes it. We do go down to a Heat Wave though. I swap into Mightyena and go for Hyper Voice, which is actually 120 base power in this game, and it's enough to finish it off, so it's down to her final Pokemon Castform. I stay in and get hit with a Flamethrower, but we're able to survive and fire back with another Hyper Voice, which does a lot. We faint to a Thunderbolt though, so I just swap into Arcanine and go for Extreme Speed, which is enough to finish it off from there. I'm not sure if that crit mattered, but I'll take it. We earn the badge and get the TM for Overheat, which I decide to teach to Manectric, replacing Shockwave. Next up is the 5th gym leader Norman, and once again this guy was a real pain. Espeon goes for Skill Swap as always, and Slacking goes for a Hyper Beam which almost takes out Ariados, but we do actually just survive. I decide to team up on the Espeon, so one Shadow Ball from Mightyena followed by a Signal Beam from Ariados is enough to finish it off. Thank God that thing's out the way early. Swellow's out next and finishes off Ariados, so I just swap into Manectric. We get our second Intimidate off, which is really helpful, and we hit a Poison Fang on Slacking which does decent damage and poisons it, but unfortunately he has that synchronized from earlier, so we get poisoned as well. Manectric finishes off Swellow with a Thunderbolt, and next up is Kangaskhan. Slacking goes for a Superpower on Mightyena, but because of the lowered attack it really doesn't do that much. I hit a Hyper Voice which hits both Pokemon, but it doesn't really do that much to either. Next turn we do get hit with a Fake Out, but we just survive, and Manectric goes for a Thunderbolt which finishes off Slacking. Tauros comes out as Mightyena falls to the poison, so I decide to swap into Politoed. I land a Thunderbolt on Tauros which does a lot of damage, as he hits back with an Earth Power which we barely survive. Kangaskhan hits Politoed with the Crush Claw for a good amount of damage as we fire back with the Hydro Pump which takes out the Tauros. Next up is Snorlax as I hit a Thunderbolt on Kangaskhan, and it actually does a lot of damage. Unfortunately, Politoed goes down to a Crush Claw, so I decide to swap in Minun, as Snorlax starts using Curse. One more Thunderbolt is enough to finish off the Kangaskhan, so all we have to do now is take out this Snorlax. I lower his accuracy with Flash as he decides to go for Stockpile, which boosts his defenses even more. He uses Rest and his only attacking move is Snore, which eventually takes out a couple of our Pokemon, and it's just down to Arcanine. We eventually get a critical hit though, which is enough to finish off the Snorlax and win us the badge. Thank God that fight is over. With this gym badge we can now learn Surf, so now we can make our way to the next city. I pick up the 6 lucky eggs that will definitely come in useful for the rest of this run, and also take down the Weather Institute, which wasn't too much of a problem. We also face off against May, but as always she really didn't cause us any problems either. Slightly more difficult than that though was the 6th gym leader Winona. As always she has the legendary birds which are not fun to deal with. She starts with Aerodactyl and Zapdos, so I lead with Minun and Mightyena. We get the Intimidate, which means that Minun survives not 1 but 2 hits and fires back with a Thunderbolt. It does a lot of damage to Aerodactyl, but she just hangs on. Mightyena hits a Shadow Ball on Zapdos, which doesn't do that much damage, but it does lower her defense. Minun goes down the next turn, so I swap into Manectric and get another Intimidate off. We do get hit with a Sky Attack, which hardly does any damage because of the lowered attack, and Mightyena goes for a Hyper Voice. This knocks out Aerodactyl and lowers Zapdos' defense even more. Crobat's out next, but Manectric is faster. We hit a Thunderbolt and we actually end up getting a critical hit as well, which knocks it out from full health. Flygon comes out next as Zapdos hits a Hidden Power, but it really doesn't do that much damage, and Mightyena hits another Shadow Ball, which is enough to finish off Zapdos. Articuno is out next, but Manectric is faster. We hit a Thunderbolt which does a good amount of damage, bringing it down to about a quarter of its health. Flygon goes for Earthquake though, which does a lot of damage to Mightyena, but knocks out Manectric. I send in Arcanine, who lowers their attack for the 3rd time. Articuno hits an Ice Beam, but as you'd expect it really doesn't do that much. I hit a Shadow Ball as Mightyena, which doesn't do too much to Flygon but does lower his defense. And next turn Arcanine's able to finish off the Articuno with an Extreme Speed. The last of her Pokemon, Moltres, comes out, as Flygon finishes off Mightyena with the Dragon Claw. I send out Politoed as Arcanine hits an Extreme Speed on Flygon, which does a lot of damage thanks to the lower defense. She just hangs on though and hits an Earthquake, but both Pokemon survive with health to spare. Moltres hits a Sky Attack on Politoed, but he takes it like an absolute boss. We hit back with a Surf, which is enough to finish off the Flygon and does a good amount of damage to Moltres as well. All we have to do now is take out this Moltres and Arcanine has Wild Charge. It's enough to finish it off and we win the badge. We face off against Maxie once again, and this time he wasn't actually that difficult to deal with. It's always sunny here, and Arcanine has Fire-type moves obviously, which are really powered up by the sun. Because of this, most of his team go down with ease. Even his Entei wasn't that difficult to deal with, so we win without any real problems. We arrive in Lily Cove now, where I get the Blizzard TM, which I decide to teach to Politoed. There's a few Dragon types coming up soon, so I'm going to really need this move. Team Aqua didn't cause us any problems either, so let's move on to the 7th gym leaders. As always, Liza and Tate lead off with Latias and Latios, so I start with Mightyena and Minun. Latias hits Minun with a Dragon Claw, but we've actually got some decent special defense, so we take the hit and fire back with a Signal Beam. It doesn't do that much damage though, and Mightyena gets hit with another Dragon Claw. We actually take the hit no problem though, and fire back with a Shadow Ball, which actually does over half to Latias. Mightyena survives a second Dragon Claw, as Minun hits Latios with another Signal Beam, which brings it down below half. Mightyena falls to one more Dragon Claw though, so I swap into Manectric. Manectric's faster than pretty much everything, so we hit a crunch on Latias and it's enough to take it out. Gardevoir comes out as Minun hits another Signal Beam on Latios and it's enough to finish it off as well. Medicham is out next and hits Minun with a Fake Out, but it doesn't do too much as Manectric hits a crunch on Gardevoir for about half. Gardevoir hits back with a Psychic though, but Minun somehow survives. One more crunch is enough to finish off the Gardevoir, and next out is Starmie. Minun hits a Thunderbolt on Medicham, which does a decent amount of damage as well, but we get finished off by a Brick Break. I send out Arcanine as Manectric goes for a Thunderbolt on Starmie, and it's actually enough to take it out from full health. Out comes Jirachi as Medicham gets hit by Arcanine's Flamethrower, which is enough to finish it off thanks to a lucky crit. It's just down to Jirachi now, but Manectric has Overheat. It's super effective and much to my surprise is enough to KO from full health, winning us the 7th gym badge, and actually this was my first attempt at this. We absolutely bossed the ice puzzle this time and make our way to Archie. Believe it or not though, he wasn't actually that difficult. Once we get past the 2 legendaries at the start, the rest was pretty much a breeze. Now we arrive in Zootopolis and summon Rayquaza. Rayquaza's like,
"So I'm gonna pay you $100 to fuck off."
And now we can face off against the final 2 gym leaders. First up is Wallace, who wasn't too bad. He leads off with a Kingdra, so I start with Mightyena. We do get hit with an Octazooka for over half our health, but we fire back with a Hyper Voice. We don't get the defense drop though and get hit with another Octazooka and go down, so I swap into Ariados. We just survive an Octazooka and hit back with a Poison Fang, which does a lot of damage. I thought I was going to get KO'd this turn, so I just go for one more, but he actually swaps out. Swampert comes out and gets hit with a Poison Fang, but it doesn't do that much damage, and we go down to an Earthquake the next turn. I swap in Politoed so I can make use of our Swift Swim ability as it's raining. We miss the Hydro Pump though and get hit with an Earthquake for just under half. The second one hits though and does massive damage as he actually misses the Yawn. Because of this we can just hit a Surf for the KO. Castform's out next, but it's pretty weak to be honest, and one Thunderbolt from Manectric is enough to KO thanks to a critical hit. Kingdra comes back out, so I decide to go into Arcanine because we have extreme speed, and it is enough to finish it off from there. Next out is Ludicolo, and we don't really have a counter for this, so I just stay in. One extreme speed does about half as we're hit with a Surf, which we just barely hang on from. I land one more extreme speed, but it's not quite enough to finish it off. We go down to one more Surf, so I just swap into Politoed to try and outspeed. I'm pretty sure we both have Swift Swim, but Ludicolo is not as fast as we are, so it goes down to one Body Slam. Next out is Lapras, so I swap back into Manectric and go for Thunderbolt, which does a good amount of damage, but not quite enough. We survive a Surf no problem though, and finish it off with one more. His final Pokemon is Milotic, so I swap into Minun. We easily take a Surf and fire back with a Thunderbolt, which does a lot of damage. We go down to one more though, so I swap into Politoed. He actually misses the Hypnosis as we land a Body Slam, which does a lot of damage, but not quite enough. He just opts to go for Surf this time though, which we can survive, so we just finish it off with one more Body Slam. We beat Wallace, but there's one more battle we have to do before we can get the 8th gym badge. That being Juan, who leads off with Lapras and Kingdra. I start with our 2 electric types and take down the Kingdra with 2 Thunderbolts, and next up is Castform. Lapras hits a Hydro Pump on Manectric, which does quite a bit of damage, but we do hang on. We hit a Thunderbolt on the Castform, which is enough to take it out from full health, and next up is a Vaporeon. Minun lands a Thunderbolt on the Lapras, which does decent damage, but he hits back with a Hydro Pump, which takes out Minun. I swap in Politoed and hit a Body Slam on Vaporeon for a small amount as he finishes off Manectric with a Hydro Pump. I switch in Ariados, who gets immediately hit with an Ice Beam from Lapras, but we do hang on. One more Body Slam from Politoed brings Vaporeon down to about half, as he actually misses a Hydro Pump. Lapras doesn't miss though and finishes off Ariados, so I swap into Arcanine. We land an extreme speed on Vaporeon and we actually get a critical hit as well, which takes it out. Ludicolo comes out as I hit a Body Slam on Lapras, but it doesn't do that much. And then Lapras hits a Hydro Pump on Arcanine for an easy KO. I swap in Mightyena and go for a Body Slam on Lapras, which finally takes it out. His final new Pokemon Lantern comes out as Ludicolo hits a Giga Drain on Politoed for a good amount of damage. Mightyena hits both Pokemon with Hyper Voice, and we actually get the defense drops as well. Because of this, Politoed's Body Slam does a lot of damage to Ludicolo, but he does hit another Giga Drain. Politoed is beefy though and survives another Giga Drain as Mightyena hits both Pokemon with another Hyper Voice. Ludicolo just survives, and Lantern takes a decent amount of damage as well. He hits back with a Hydro Pump though, but Mightyena just survives. Politoed finishes off Ludicolo with one more Body Slam, and Mightyena lands one more Hyper Voice, which is enough to finish off Lantern and win us the badge. With our 8 badges in hand, we take on Victory Road. We face off against Wally, but he was actually really easy to beat. Who wasn't so easy to beat though was Red. He starts off with a Ho-Oh, which is absolutely terrifying, but Manectric does deal with it. He doesn't just have the one legendary though, oh no. He has a Celebi which Arcanine deals with, and he's also got a Mew. Thankfully Manectric is able to deal with that as well, and the rest of his team wasn't actually that bad. We travel through Victory Road until we arrive at the Pokemon League. Here you can actually buy rare candies really cheap, so I buy as many as I need to get the team to level 100. Here's a final look at our team before the Elite Four. I've got to say, I'm really happy with the team we've managed to bring up this time. I thought some of these members would be absolutely useless, but that's not the case. Every single member of the team has something going for it, and it's definitely better than my last team for sure. Will we be able to beat the Elite Four though? I don't know. I guess we're just going to have to find out. The first member of the Elite Four is Sydney, who leads off with a Sableye. I lead with Manectric and go straight for Thunderbolt. It doesn't do too much though, and he hits back with a Shadow Ball for about half. One more Thunderbolt brings it down to low health, as we're hit with another Shadow Ball which brings us down to red health. I know for a fact he has Shadow Sneak, so I swap into Minun. He does indeed go for it, but it doesn't do that much. We easily outspeed it, and one Thunderbolt is enough to KO. Next up is Tauros, so I swap into Ariados as we get hit with a Double Edge which does a lot. We just hang on though, and he does some good damage to himself as we hit a Poison Fang. We go down to a Quick Attack, so I swap into Manectric just to get the Intimidate off, and then I swap into Arcanine, who also has Intimidate. Because of this, his attacks are really not doing much damage. We're outsped and hit by an Earthquake, but as you can see, we take it like a champ. Flamethrower isn't quite enough to KO, but we have Extreme Speed, which has a higher priority than Quick Attack, so it's enough to finish it off. Alakazam is out next, so I swap into Mightyena as we get hit with a Thunder Punch, but it doesn't do that much damage. I go for Shadow Ball because of our higher physical attack, and we actually end up getting a critical hit which takes it out from full health. Jolteon comes out next and we're able to do some good damage with Seismic Toss from Minun, but we do go down eventually, so I just swap into Arcanine for the easy Extreme Speed KO. I swap Mightyena in for Machamp just so we can lower its attack. We do outspeed and hit a Hyper Voice which does okay damage, but we can't survive the incoming superpower, so I just swap into Manectric. Obviously we outspeed, but I wasn't sure if Thunderbolt was going to be enough, but we got a critical hit, so it goes down. Sydney's final Pokemon is Houndoom, so I just swap into Politoed. He does have a super effective hidden power, but we hit back with a Hydro Pump. It's not quite enough to KO, but we do survive a second hidden power and just finish it off with a Surf, winning us the first match of the Elite Four relatively easily. Next up is Phoebe, and she was actually a bit more of a pain to deal with than Sydney. She starts off with Gengar, so I lead with Mightyena as we're hit with a Thunderbolt for about half. I retaliate with a Shadow Ball though, which also does a good amount of damage. However, we do get put to sleep and KO'd, so I swap into Manectric and finish it off with a Crunch. I swap into Minun for Crobat. She actually misses the Hypnosis. We land a Thunderbolt for good damage, and we actually get the Paralysis as well. Because of this, we're now faster, and one more Thunderbolt finishes it off. Ludicolo is out next, so I swap into Ariados as we get hit with a Surf. We do hang on though and fire back with a Poison Fang, which is not quite enough to KO. We go down to one more Surf though, so I just swap into Minun and go for a Seismic Toss for the KO. Next up is Gardevoir, so I stay in as we get hit with a Thunder Wave, but I do manage to hit a Flash. We deal some good damage as well before we go down to a couple of Psychics, so I just swap into Manectric and finish it off with a Crunch. Dusclops faints to a few crunches, so it's just down to her final Pokemon, Sableye. But this wasn't too much of a problem either, as a few Thunderbolts take it out, and we win the match. Next up though is Glacia, the one who brought an end to our challenge last time. Let's see how this goes. First up is Glalie, so I start with Politoed and go straight for Surf. It does about half, and our Ice Beam really doesn't do much damage to us, so one more Surf takes it out. Next up is Reggie, so I swap into Mightyena.
Do you want to play?
What the fuck? Alexa, stop. Iron Tail does a decent amount of damage, nearly half in fact. She hits back with a counter though, which does a lot of damage, but we just hang on. We're able to hit one more Iron Tail, bringing it down to a sliver before we go down to an Ice Beam. I swap into Minun, who's faster, and one Seismic Toss is enough to finish it off, and next up is Dugong. Dugong's faster because of Swift Swim and hits a Surf, which does a lot. Thankfully we survive though and hit back with a Thunderbolt, which actually does a decent amount of damage. We go down to a Drill Run the next turn though, so I swap into Manectric. Dugong's faster than Manectric as well and hits another Surf, which almost takes us out, but we do hang on and finish it off with a Thunderbolt. Next up is Zwiggo, so I swap into Politoed and go straight for a Hydro Pump. Thanks to our Swift Swim we're faster and we actually do about 50%. She retaliates with an Earthquake, but we hang on and one more Hydro Pump is enough to take it out. Lapras is out next, so I swap into Ariados and she actually misses the Hydro Pump. Because of this we can actually hit a Poison Fang, which does a decent amount of damage. She doesn't miss the second Hydro Pump though, and obviously it's enough to KO, so I swap back into Politoed. I go for Earthquake, which doesn't do that much, but she misses another Hydro Pump, meaning we can bring it down to low health before we go down to a Thunder. I swap in Arcanine and go for Extreme Speed, which is now enough to KO. It's down to Glacia's final Pokemon, Wailord. I stay in and go for an Extreme Speed, which doesn't do that much as she fires back with a Water Spout, which, needless to say, is going to KO from full health. She does do a lot of damage to herself in recoil damage though, so that's something. I swap into Manectric and go for Thunderbolt, praying it'll be enough. And thankfully we get a critical hit. I don't know if this crit mattered or not, but I'm so glad it happened when it did. Wailord goes down and we beat Glacia. We have now officially got further than before. The final member of the Elite Four is Drake though, and let me tell you, he was not messing around. He has both the Lati twins and I'm pretty sure they have Soul Dew. Their moves do so much damage to the point where the only Pokemon on my team that can take a hit is Politoed, and even then, Blizzard hardly does anything. Needless to say, we lost. We did manage to beat the Latios, but his next Pokemon Tyranitar just wipes the floor with the rest of my team. I was going to need another strategy if I wanted to win this, but I did come up with something. Manectric is the only member of my team which is actually faster than all of his Pokemon, so I teach it the move Flash. After many attempts, we finally get a run where Latios doesn't even hit us once. And because of that, we can take it out in just a few crunches. Tyranitar is up next, so I swap into Mightyena and hit a couple of Iron Tails which do some good damage. We go down to a couple of hidden powers though, so I swap back into Manectric. We're able to outspeed and go for a Thunderbolt, which is just enough to KO. Next up is Salamence, so I swap into Politoed. We get hit with an Air Slash, but we survive, and retaliate with a Blizzard, which is actually enough to take it out from full health. I really think that would have destroyed the rest of the team otherwise. Kingdra is out next, so I swap into Ariados. We get hit with a Draco Meteor, but we actually survive. He does some big damage to himself, and we can hit a Poison Fang for a decent amount as well. We do feint to an Ice Beam the next turn, so I swap into Minun and go for Thunderbolt. It's not quite enough, but he goes for Draco Meteor again. We survive the hit, and the recoil damage is enough to knock himself out. Next up is Dragonite, so I swap into Arcanine to get the Intimidate. I go straight for the Extreme Speed, and right off the bat we get a critical hit. We get hit with an Earthquake, but we take the hit no problem thanks to Intimidate. I go for a Crunch this turn, which does a decent amount of damage, but we get hit with an Earthquake, which is enough to finish us off. I swap back into Manectric and go for Thunderbolt, which is enough to take it out from there. It's now down to his final Pokemon, Latias. I go for the same strategy, spamming Flash and hoping she doesn't hit. Thankfully she never lands a move as we start spamming Crunch, and we even get a few special defense drops. Because of this we can actually take it out without taking damage. I'm absolutely certain that if we'd even got hit once, it would have taken us out. Latias goes down and we beat the final member of the Elite Four. Champion time. This fight started off better than I could have ever have hoped for, with a critical hit Flamethrower from Arcanine. This is promising. Next up is Starmie, so I swap into Manectric and go for a Thunderbolt. It's not quite enough to KO when she hits back with a Hydro Pump, which does a lot of damage to us. We just hang on though and take it out with one more Thunderbolt. Aerodactyl's up next, so I stay in, praying I'll be faster, but we're not, and we go down to one Ancient Power. I swap in Minun and get hit with an Earthquake, but we just survive the hit. We're able to hit a Thunderbolt, which does a really good amount of damage, but not quite enough to KO. We go down the next turn, so I swap into Politoed. We get hit with a Sky Attack, which does a lot of damage, but we hang on. One Surf is enough to finish it off from there, and next up is Jirachi. I swap Arcanine back in and go for Flamethrower, which does a lot of damage. We get hit with an extra Sensory, but we take the hit no problem and fire back with one more Flamethrower for the KO. Next up is Mewtwo though, which is absolutely terrifying. I swap into Mightyena, who's immune to his psychic attacks. He lands a flamethrower which does about half as we fire back with a Shadow Ball. It doesn't even do half though. Mewtwo goes for one more flamethrower, but we survive on 1 HP. We manage to hit one more Shadow Ball before we go down the next turn. I swap Arcanine back in because we have extreme speed, and thankfully it is enough to KO from that range. It's down to his final Pokemon, Deoxys. I swap in Ariados knowing full well that we won't get to attack, but I had a feeling he'd go for Psycho Boost. He does in fact go for it, and as you can see he does some good damage to himself in recoil. I swap in Politoed just so he can do as much damage to himself in recoil as possible. And now it's down to our final Pokemon, Arcanine. Our only hope of winning this now is extreme speed. I go for it, praying that it will be enough. And it actually is. We take out Deoxys, beat Steven, and I beat Pokemon Emerald Kaizo using the first 6 Pokemon I found. I can't believe we actually did it. Drake was almost enough to end this challenge for us, but we just managed to pull through. I have to say I got incredibly lucky with this team. Arcanine was fantastic, Politoed was surprisingly useful, and Manectric ended up being the best team member by far. It was blazingly fast and could hit really hard with Thunderbolt. Even Pokemon like Mightyena and Minun were surprisingly useful. I was also really lucky to have 3 Pokemon with Intimidate. But there we go, it can be done. Would I recommend you try this challenge? Absolutely. The game is incredibly challenging, and imposing these rules makes that even worse. But despite being frustrating at times, it was fun to do. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider leaving a like, and comment down below with what challenge I should take on next. Remember, if I pick your idea, you'll get a shout out in the next video. Also, please consider following me on Twitter and joining the Discord. All the links you need will be in the description below. Also, we now have memberships. Tier 1 gets you some really cool emotes like this, and Tier 2 also gives you a shout out at the end of the next video. So I have to say thank you to both Kenzie Bunker and Boki7 for becoming Tier 2 members. If you are interested in becoming a member, then the link is in the description below along with all the other links. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.